The sun was just beginning to rise over the quiet lakeside town when Cole Henderson parked his truck in front of the modest one-story home that would mark a new chapter in his life. A retired drill sergeant with decades of service behind him, Cole had seen war zones, chaos, and hardship. But nothing had ever mattered more to him than his daughter, Emma. After a tragic accident left her paralyzed from the waist down, Cole made it his mission to find peace, not just for himself, but for the brave little girl who now depended on him for everything. The house sat nestled at the end of a cul-de-sac, with tall trees swaying gently and birds chirping in the distance. It was the kind of place Cole hoped would finally give them both a sense of normalcy. Emma beamed from her wheelchair, excited about the fresh start. Cole smiled back, his chest swelling with hope. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, they could be happy here. That illusion shattered just 3 hours later. As Cole unloaded boxes from the truck, a woman stood at the edge of the driveway, arms folded tightly across her chest. Her blonde hair was styled to perfection, not a strand out of place, and her sharp eyes flicked over Cole's every movement, like a hawk inspecting prey. She wore a tight pastel sweater, beige slacks, and the kind of overly bright smile that immediately felt wrong. "I'm Karen," she announced, her voice sugary but cold underneath. "I'm the head of the HOA. We like to keep things orderly around here." Cole nodded, polite but cautious. Something in her tone pierced through him. She hadn't even glanced at Emma. He didn't know it yet, but Karen wasn't just nosy. She was dangerous. Cole wiped the sweat from his brow as he hoisted another box onto the porch, the early afternoon sun beating down on his neck. Emma sat nearby, watching the breeze play through the leaves as her father worked. She was used to moving, used to the tired look in her father's eyes as he did everything alone. But something about this place felt different. Peaceful. For a moment, it almost felt like home. But that moment was short-lived. The sharp click of heels on concrete pulled Cole's attention toward the street. Karen was walking straight toward them, arms swinging just enough to show confidence, but her gaze, cool, scrutinizing, made Cole's instincts stir. He'd seen that kind of look before. Not in a friendly neighbor. In commanders who didn't like to be questioned. She stopped just short of the porch and plastered on a tight-lipped smile. "I just wanted to be the first to welcome you to our little community," she said, eyeing Emma for the briefest second before turning her attention back to Cole. "We don't get many new faces." Cole extended a hand, ever the polite soldier, but Karen took a moment too long to accept it. When she did, her grip was limp, her fingers barely wrapping around his. He introduced himself and Emma with a warm smile, but Karen barely acknowledged the child in the wheelchair. Her eyes darted to the ramp still under construction, and her smile faltered. "I see you're making some changes already," she said, her tone almost playful, but there was steel underneath it. "I just hope everything's being cleared with the HOA. We have guidelines, very strict ones." Cole's expression didn't change. "It's for my daughter," he said calmly. "The ramp's necessary." Karen's smile thinned. "Of course. I just hope it doesn't, affect the look of the neighborhood. We work really hard to maintain a certain atmosphere." There it was, the judgment, the message that they weren't exactly welcome, not like everyone else. Cole could feel the warning in her words. He nodded, respectful but firm. "We're just here to live quietly and take care of our own." Karen tilted her head slightly, her eyes narrowing just enough to show that she wasn't finished. Then, without another word, she turned and walked away, leaving behind an uneasy silence. The next morning, the sound of a power drill echoed through the cul-de-sac as Cole secured the final planks of the wooden ramp leading up to the front door. It was simple, clean, and designed with Emma's independence in mind. She watched from the driveway, her face lighting up every time her father stepped back to inspect his work. For the first time, she wouldn't have to be lifted or carried through a doorway like a burden. She could roll in on her own. To Cole, it was more than a ramp. It was dignity. But as the last screw went in, the now familiar clicking of heels came from across the street. Cole didn't look up. He didn't have to. Karen's presence was unmistakable, and when she spoke, her voice was thick with thinly veiled disgust. "So," she said, drawing out the word, "you really went through with it." Cole set down the drill and turned slowly, wiping his hands on a rag. "It's done. Emma needs it." Karen's gaze swept over the ramp like it was a defaced statue. "You know we have design codes. That kind of structure isn't exactly in line with the neighborhood aesthetic." She smiled like she was offering helpful advice, but her eyes betrayed her true intent. Cole didn't flinch. "I read the guidelines. There's an exception for accessibility accommodations, and frankly, I'm not asking for your permission." Karen's smile vanished. "We strive for visual harmony, Mr. Henderson. This looks out of place. It sends a message." He took a step forward, his voice dropping to a calm but iron tone. "The message it sends is that my daughter has the right to live like anyone else." Karen crossed her arms. "Just keep in mind, we review non-conformities every month. The HOA has the authority to impose penalties." Cole held her gaze, unshaken. "And I have the authority to protect my daughter. If you want to file a complaint, go ahead. But you touch that ramp, or come near my girl, and I promise you'll be dealing with a whole different kind of authority." Karen blinked, caught off guard by the sudden fire behind his eyes. For the first time, she didn't have a comeback. She simply turned on her heel and walked away, the air between them charged with quiet hostility. Emma rolled over beside her father, eyes wide. "She doesn't like me, does she?" Cole looked down, gently brushing her hair from her face. "She's not worth your worry, sweetheart. She's the one with the problem, not you." The weekend brought a small neighborhood gathering at the local community center. A potluck and meet and greet, organized by the HOA to welcome new residents. Cole debated skipping it altogether, but Emma had been looking forward to it since she saw the flyer. She'd picked out a bright yellow dress and even asked if she could help bake cookies to bring along. Cole couldn't say no. He packed the treats into a tin and loaded Emma's wheelchair into the truck, determined to make the day enjoyable for her no matter what tension simmered beneath the surface. The community center was already buzzing with families when they arrived. Folding tables lined the lawn, draped in checkered cloths and filled with casseroles, pies, and neighborhood chatter. Kids ran in circles, their laughter filling the air. Emma's eyes lit up, soaking it all in. But the warmth in the air faded the moment they crossed the parking lot. Karen stood near the welcome table, clipboard in hand, and sunglasses perched like a crown. As Cole wheeled Emma across the grass, her gaze found them instantly. She didn't wave, didn't smile, just watched, her lips pressed tight. A few of the other women around her whispered behind painted nails, their eyes flicking to Emma, then back to Karen, waiting to see how she would react. Cole nodded politely as they passed, but Karen turned slightly, pretending not to see them. When another neighbor extended a polite, "Hello," Karen interjected smoothly and guided the conversation away, creating a social detour that left Cole and Emma standing awkwardly alone beside a table of punch. Emma noticed. She wasn't naive. She'd seen that kind of treatment before, the way adults smiled at her like she was a charity case, or ignored her completely, like she didn't fit into their world. But here, it was different. It was colder, more calculated. Cole knelt beside her and whispered, "You okay?" Emma nodded, but her voice was small. They don't want us here. Cole looked around the sea of forced smiles and averted eyes and felt something tighten in his chest. They just don't know you yet, he said gently. But in his gut, he knew the truth. This wasn't ignorance. It was exclusion, led by one woman who saw herself as queen of the cul-de-sac, and Emma as unworthy of the throne. The annual River Festival was the biggest event in town, a sun-drenched celebration held on the banks of the slow-moving Silverpine River. Booths lined the grass, music floated through the trees, and the scent of barbecue and kettle corn drifted in the air. For most families, it was a day of joy. For Cole, it was a chance to give Emma something she hadn't had in a long time, a day where she could feel like any other kid. He pushed her wheelchair along the winding path, both of them smiling as they passed jugglers, food stands, and musicians playing upbeat folk tunes. Emma clutched a balloon in one hand and a chocolate-dipped cone in the other, laughing as they moved from booth to booth. For a while, it felt like the world had forgotten to be cruel. People smiled. Children waved. No one gave them strange looks. But then Cole saw her. Karen stood near the riverbank, flanked by 2 HOA board members. She wasn't mingling, just watching. Her posture was stiff, her arms crossed over her chest, and her gaze locked on Cole and Emma like a sniper marking a target. She wore that same artificial smile, but her eyes were sharp and joyless. In her hand, she held her phone, the screen angled toward them. Not obviously filming, but recording just enough to make it unsettling. Cole's grip tightened on the handles of Emma's chair. He didn't want to cause a scene, not with kids laughing and boats drifting past on the river. But every fiber of his being went on alert. Karen wasn't just loitering, she was planning something. He could feel it. Emma didn't notice. She was too busy looking at the water, asking if maybe later they could go down to the river's edge, so she could watch the ducks more closely. Cole nodded, kneeling beside her. "We'll go soon, sweetheart. I promise." Behind them, Karen leaned toward one of the other women and whispered something. They all turned in unison, eyes following Emma with unreadable expressions. It wasn't curiosity. It was calculation. Cole stood slowly, watching them with growing unease. He couldn't explain it, but the air around him had shifted. The sunlight felt too bright, the music too far away. Something was coming, something ugly, and he was going to have to be ready. The afternoon sun glinted off the river's surface, casting golden reflections across the grass as families gathered closer to the water for the final events of the festival. Kids raced down the banks, tossing bread to ducks, while parents sipped lemonade and chatted. Cole and Emma had made their way to a quiet corner near the edge of the river, where the slope was gentle and shaded by a tall oak. Emma's face glowed with delight as she watched the ducks paddle lazily in the shallows, her fingers tapping the armrest of her wheelchair in excitement. "I'm going to grab us some cold drinks," Cole said, brushing a hand over her shoulder. "Stay right here, okay?" Emma nodded eagerly, still focused on the water. Cole turned and jogged toward the lemonade stand just a short distance away, never imagining that in the next minute, everything would go horribly wrong. Karen had been waiting. She stood a few yards back, partially hidden behind a booth, her phone clutched in one hand, eyes locked on Emma. Her face was calm, too calm, and her movements deliberate as she stepped forward. The crowd was distracted, their attention pulled toward a nearby tug-of-war competition. No one was looking. No one except her. She approached from behind, her footsteps quiet on the grass. Emma didn't hear her. She didn't sense the danger until it was too late. With a sudden, brutal motion, Karen slammed both hands into the back of Emma's wheelchair. The chair lurched forward. Emma screamed. The front wheels caught the edge of the riverbank and flipped, In an instant, the entire chair, Emma and all, tumbled into the cold, rushing water. The splash was deafening. The crowd turned, confused. Screams rang out. Cole's head snapped around. The lemonade cups hit the ground. He sprinted faster than he had in years, tearing through the crowd, shoving past stunned onlookers. His boots slammed against the earth as he reached the bank just in time to see Emma's head bob above the surface, her arms flailing, the wheelchair sinking beside her. He dove. The shock of the icy water hit him like a fist, but he pushed through it, swimming with brutal force toward the terrified shape of his daughter. The current pulled at her, dragging her further from the edge. Her cries were panicked, water choking her voice. "Hold on, baby," he roared, closing the gap with powerful strokes. He reached her just as she slipped under again, grabbing her around the waist and pulling her up. Her eyes locked onto his, wide with fear, but alive. With every ounce of strength, Cole kicked toward the shore, his arms wrapped tightly around Emma. His lungs screamed for air, but he didn't stop, not until they reached the edge, and he hauled her, coughing and trembling, onto the muddy bank. He collapsed beside her, gasping. Above them, Karen stood with her phone held high, filming the entire thing. Her face twisted into a sick grin. Cole saw her, and something inside him snapped. Cole rose slowly, his body drenched and trembling, not from the cold, but from something deeper, pure volcanic fury. Emma clung to his arm, still coughing, water streaming from her dress and hair. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with shock. But she was breathing. She was alive. That was all that mattered. For now. Across the grass, Karen hadn't moved. She stood at the top of the riverbank, like a queen overlooking chaos, her phone still held aloft like a trophy. The twisted satisfaction on her face was unmistakable. She had watched it all unfold like it was entertainment. Her lips curled into a faint, smug smile as Cole met her gaze. He handed Emma gently to a bystander who had rushed over to help and began walking. Each step felt heavier than the last, soaked boots slapping the grass, water dripping from his clothes. The crowd around him parted instinctively, silence falling like a veil. All eyes were on him and her. Karen's smile faded as he approached, his jaw clenched, shoulders squared. The calm, steady voice that had once commanded battalions now sliced through the thick silence like a blade. "What the hell is wrong with you?" Karen blinked, her hand lowering slightly, but the smugness lingered in her expression. "It was just an accident," she said, her tone defensive, almost childish. "She was too close to the edge. I didn't mean—" "Don't," Cole growled. "Don't lie." His eyes burned into hers, unflinching. "You pushed her. You waited until I walked away and you pushed my daughter into a river. And now you're standing here filming it like it's a joke." Karen opened her mouth to protest again, but Cole cut her off, his voice dropping into a tone so cold it made her flinch. "She's a child, my child. You don't get to decide who belongs here. You don't get to decide who deserves to smile, to live. And you sure as hell don't get to hurt her without consequences." Karen took a step back, the color draining from her face. "If you ever come near her again," Cole continued, "you'll regret it. I promise you that." The crowd stood frozen. No one defended her. No one dared. Cole turned without another word, walked back to his daughter and pulled her into his arms. His message had been delivered. Karen's reign of cruelty was over. Sirens pierced the tension-filled air, growing louder with each second, until a police cruiser skidded to a halt near the edge of the park. 2 officers stepped out, scanning the gathered crowd, the panic, and then the soaked, shivering child wrapped in a towel. Cole didn't wait. He stood up, steady now, jaw tight with purpose, and strode toward the officers with fire still burning in his chest. "She pushed my daughter into the river," he said without hesitation, pointing toward Karen, who had now lowered her phone and was visibly shaken. On purpose, I have video. The officer's eyes widened slightly, exchanging a silent glance before one of them turned to Karen. "Ma'am, we need to speak with you." Karen opened her mouth, searching for words, but none came. Her confidence cracked like thin glass. She was too close to the water. I didn't mean to. "We'll get your statement," the officer interrupted, pulling out a notepad. But his partner had already moved to Cole, who now had his phone in hand, the screen glowing with damning evidence. He pressed play. The footage was clear, crystal clear. Karen approaching from behind, the sudden shove, the wheelchair tumbling, Emma's scream, the splash. The crowd gasped. The officers didn't need a second look. The damage was done. "Based on this footage," the lead officer said, his tone hardening, "and the witness accounts we've gathered, you're under arrest for reckless endangerment and aggravated assault of a disabled minor." Karen's face went pale. "No, wait. I didn't mean this is being blown out of proportion." "You filmed it," the officer snapped as he pulled out his cuffs. "That doesn't sound accidental to me." With her hands trembling, Karen was cuffed on the spot. The crowd watched in stunned silence, a few parents hugging their kids tighter, others murmuring their disbelief. Some looked relieved. It was as if the entire neighborhood had been held hostage by Karen's presence for too long, and now justice had finally arrived. As the officers led her toward the cruiser, Cole knelt beside Emma once more, brushing a damp strand of hair from her forehead. "It's over," he whispered. "She can't hurt you anymore." Emma nodded faintly, a small tired smile breaking through the fear. And in that moment, Cole knew the battle had been worth it. The days that followed were quiet, the kind of quiet Cole had hoped for when he first brought Emma to this town. But now it came with bruises, both seen and unseen. Emma spent most of her time resting, wrapped in soft blankets on the couch, while Cole remained close, never more than a few feet away. Her body ached, but her spirit was intact. She smiled when he read to her. She laughed softly when he made her favorite soup and spilled half of it on the floor trying to be fancy. Slowly, she was healing. But Cole wasn't the same. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw that moment. The wheelchair rolling, Emma's scream, the water swallowing her whole. He had faced enemies in war zones, men with guns and hatred in their eyes, but nothing had ever shaken him like watching his daughter struggle to stay above water. And what haunted him more was that it wasn't an accident. It was malice. He found himself thinking about all the families who didn't speak up, all the neighbors who had watched Karen dominate with her false charm and silent cruelty. He realized now that standing up once wasn't enough. People needed to see that silence can be just as dangerous as action. Cole made a promise, not just to himself, but to Emma. He would speak out. He would use what happened to bring awareness, to challenge the way people treated those who were different, especially children with disabilities. What Karen tried to destroy would become something stronger, a voice for change. Emma's hand found his one evening, as they sat watching the sun dip behind the trees. She didn't say a word, but she didn't have to. Cole squeezed her fingers gently and whispered, "I've got you, kiddo." Always. In a world where cruelty often hides behind smiles and rules, standing up for what's right isn't just brave, it's necessary. Cole didn't just save his daughter from drowning, he stood against silence, prejudice, and entitlement. Emma's strength reminded everyone watching that every life has worth, every voice matters. If you believe that kindness should be louder than hate, that no one deserves to be pushed aside, especially not a child, then let this story be a reminder. Be the one who speaks up, protect those who can't, and never let anyone decide who belongs. Like and subscribe for more true stories that matter.